Good morning, brothers and sisters, and our guests who are joining us today. Today is the 22nd of July, and I'd like to call our meeting to order, and we'll start with a moment of silence to remember our fallen brothers and sisters across our country. All right, thank you. All right, so Steve, by all means, if I can get off track, make sure you jump in. But first order of business I see before us is adoption of our June 2020 minutes. So we'd entertain a motion to adopt.
Yes, sir. Motion to adopt.
Second.
We have a motion to adopt, and we also have a second. Is there discussion on this? Hearing none, we will do a roll call vote. I'll turn it over to Tammy for your roll call.
I think Steve is actually doing that.
Okay, sorry, Steve.
Ade?
Yeah.
AJ?
Yes.
Jason?
Yes.
Tarina? Wolf?
Yes.
Dennis?
Yes.
Representative Berquist?
Yep.
Senator Holy?
Yes.
Chief McElligott?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Senator Rivers, have you been able to join us? And then Tarina?
Yes. Senator Rivers, have you been able to join us? Yes.
All right, Mr. Chair, you have 11 ayes.
All right, thank you very much. So our minutes are adopted. Our first order of business is the rate setting. I'll turn over to our Executive Director, Mr. Nelson.
Okay. As you know, one of the primary responsibilities of the board is to adopt contribution rates for Left Plan 2 for the members and the employers in the state. You do that every 2 years, and historically when you adopt rates, you adopt them for a 4-year period. So you actually have already adopted rates for the upcoming biennium, but this is your chance to change what you've adopted and also adopt rates for the following biennium. With that, I will turn it over to Jacob, who will walk you through the different options that are before the board today.
Okay. Steve, I just want to make sure you can hear me fine?
Yes.
Okay. And you can see my screen?
Let's see.
The PowerPoint?
Not yet. Can anybody else see Jacob's presentation?
I don't see that you have shared that yet, Jacob.
Okay.
There we go.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, board members. For the record, Jacob White, staff to the Left 2 board. The issue in front of the board today, as Steve just said, is that the board has the option to adopt new contribution rates for the 2021-23 and 2023-25 biennia. At the last board meeting, OSA provided a preliminary analysis of the 2019 valuation report. That was preliminary as OSA's work was being audited by Milliman and an outside actuarial firm. And there'll be more information on the results of that audit later in my presentation. I do want to say that there were changes made to this presentation yesterday. And so in case anyone was an A student and printed everything off early, you may notice some slight changes to some of the numbers and slides. So the board sets policies to assist meeting the funding goal of stable contribution rates to ensure predictable and adequate rates, the board has the following funding policies in place to achieve that goal. A short-term rate setting policy. This is 100% of the normal cost, and this is the policy the board has used since 2008. Then there's the long-term rate setting policy. This rate changes based on the plan's funded status, and this was just adopted by the board last year. So if the funded status of the plan is equal to or less than 105%, then the rate is 100% of the normal cost. And if the funded status exceeds 105%, then that rate drops down to 90% of the normal cost. Last, there's a 4-year rate adoption policy. And this is just what it sounds like. The board must adopt rates every 4 years. The board last adopted rates in 2018, and that was based on the 2017 valuation report. The board may choose to adopt new rates based on the 2019 valuation, or choose to not adopt rates because it's only been 2 years since rates were last adopted. So just a reminder of the current funded status of the plan. So OSA shared this number with us at our last board meeting. The funded status in the 2019 Val report is 111%. Just a couple things to keep in mind with this number is that it does not recognize the remaining net investment gains from the last 6 years, and this is due to asset smoothing. If these gains were to be realized now, it would increase the funding status of the plan. The 111% also does not recognize expected market losses due to COVID-19. This would likely decrease the funded status. And I should add that when I say market losses, there may not actually end up being losses. It may just be that the market returns are not as high as was anticipated. So a little more information about those 2 bullet points. First, just a quick table that the actuary's office put together to show the impact of asset smoothing on the plan. The plan still has $623 million in deferred gains, and this should lessen the impact of any future market losses or not meeting the expected investment returns. Next, the impact of COVID-19. I know the impact of this is on the plan's funded status is an issue that I'm sure you're all concerned about. OSA shared with us at the last board meeting that the preliminary investment returns from the State Investment Board for fiscal year 2020 are 0% as of March 31st. We were hoping to get some updated numbers for you, but those were not available yet. I should also add that these investment returns do not include all of our assets. In particular, real estate and private equity take longer for the investment board to value, so those are not included. The board's current investment return assumption, just a reminder, is 7.4%. And then also wanted to add that there are, as an impact of COVID-19, there may also be potential demographic changes, such as increase in retirements or delay in retirements, and also potential for increase in layoffs from employers. And so those are, at this time, unknown. Okay, so to the options. First, option 1 in front of the board today is to adopt 90% of the normal cost. Under this, the member rate would be 7.68%. Include some possible policy pros and cons for each of these options. And so for this one, possible policy pros would be that it adheres to the board's long-term funding policy. It lowers rates to account for the funded status. The rate reduction may help employers, the state, and members with their budgets that have been impacted by COVID-19. Possible cons would be that it lowers the rates while the impacts of COVID-19 on investment returns are still unknown. And it also lowers rates while the impacts of potential demographic changes are unknown. I did also want to add that these the contribution rate numbers were impacted. What you see here is not what you saw in the prior presentation last month from OSA, and that was due to a finding from the Milliman audit. They found I hope I say this right with OSA listing, but they found a technical issue with the mortality rate of term vested members. And so term vested members are those who worked long enough to vest. They have left employment, but have not yet retired. And so there was a technical issue with the mortality rate used, and that ended up having an overall impact on the contribution rate numbers of 4 basis points, 2 basis points for the member, 1 for the employer, and 1 for the state. On option 2, this is 100% of the normal cost. Under this, the member contribution rate would be 8.53%. Possible policy pros of this option are that it adheres to the board's short-term funding policy. It is the funding method the board has used since 2008. It would provide a slight rate reduction to help employers, state, and members with their budgets. It allows the board to delay further lowering rates until the impacts of COVID-19 are better known. And then a possible con is that it doesn't address the positive funded status of the plan, which was an important reason for the board adopting the long-term funding policy last year. And then the last option in front of the board is to take no action and remain to keep the contribution rates at 100% normal cost from the 2017 VAL report. Under this, the members would continue to pay 8.59%. Possible pros of this policy would be that it utilizes the board's 4-year rate adoption policy. It allows the board to delay changing rates until the impacts of COVID-19 are better known. And then possible cons are that it doesn't follow the board's short-term funding policy. So that is the end of my presentation. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to try answering them. Thank you.
There are questions for Jacob.
Mr. Chair, Jeff Foley, I got some thoughts.
Go ahead, Senator Holey.
Okay, go ahead, thanks.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. You know, I've been mulling this over for a couple of days, and I understand what our policy has been, and the corridor we set for ourselves. And yet I remember the position we were in, having close to the same conversation in 2008, when everything changed so dramatically for us, and it was an unknown in front of us. That 2008 was just another economic cycle that was, you know, it happens every 10 years or so. We seem to have a problem like that, but this is something that's totally new with a pandemic here, and we don't know what the future is right in front of us. I know we talked about Jason mentioned 111% funded status, and that's not considered the losses or gains in a smoothing corridor like we've used for, you know, decades. And so I guess if I was to look at aggregate funding status at any moment in time, you know, 1 week to the next, it might change depending upon something like COVID or market correction or this kind of a thing. The things that come to mind this time that maybe we should consider, and Jason touched very lightly on them, we've got Seattle PD is in the middle of a defunding police discussion, and say if they lose 500 to 600, 700, 800 people out of Seattle PD, this can have, Seattle PD is well paid compared to most departments, and if we reduce the principal, the base of our contributors to principal by that volume, that's going to have an impact on us. the market impact of COVID is unknown. And another thing comes to mind is you actually have any reduction of contribution now with an unknown in front of us, and we have to correct later, may be a much more severe correction. This is an elective time to take action here to slightly correct ourselves and put us back within a policy, and yet we don't have to take any action. And so I guess I kind of make a recommendation that I love the idea of just leaving it alone and seeing what flushes out in front of us. This is kind of an unknown trajectory, thread we've never been down before. But at the same time, at a minimum, I think we should hit 100% funding status. We're talking about 0.6 or 0.06 difference in the contribution rate. That's tolerable. But attempting to accomplish something that's a strict adherence to policy and going to 90%, that's problematic. That bothers me because we have way too much unknown happening in front of us here that doesn't have any precedent we can reflect back on.
Jeff? Hey, Jeff, this is Dennis. I heard the word recommendation. Are you making this in a form of a motion? Are we just still talking?
Well, I think other people, I'm recommending at a minimum staying at 100% and probably standing back and leaving it alone and seeing what flushes out in front of us, since we're not obligated to take action on this right now. This is an opportunity. This is not a mandate. And so I want to see what other people have to say before I make a motion. This is just one man's opinion.
Gotcha.
I want to find out what everybody else feels.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Yeah. Senator Holy?
Yes.
This is Steve Nelson. Your point about Seattle is well timed. So I can let you know that we've reached out to Department of Retirement Systems and to OSA to begin doing some analysis about what the potential impacts to the fund would be in the event of large-scale layoffs. Some layoffs have been talked about as local governments dealing with budget issues, going back to March, April, May. I think Tukwila was talking about it as far back as March, and they have already implemented like 10% layoffs. But something on the scale of Seattle, what Seattle is talking about, has not been experienced by the plan. And so we're working with OSA to get some detailed analysis about what those potential impacts would be. Unfortunately, we won't have that analysis ready probably until September at the earliest.
Understood. Mr. Chair, follow up?
Go ahead, Jeff.
I don't want to hog the conversation here, but Steve, you bring something else to mind. So if a number of people are laid off, so to speak, or given incentive to go away, a lot of times departments will do that through attrition. But the other part that comes to mind is the longer you're in the system, in the LEP2 system, the easier it is for the system to accommodate you. The people leave early, at 50 to 53 years old. It's a little bit more expensive to the system. If we had a bunch of people that were to leave, for example, that were vested and had adequate time on in service and adequate age to retire, and they all retired, you'd have a bulk retirement that was unexpected. Would that also have an impact on the system?
Yeah, if you have unexpected, more people retiring than expected, that has a cost to the plan. And right now, we don't have the data, OSA doesn't have the data from DRS broken out specifically to Seattle. They've got it all the first-class cities kind of lumped together. And so it's unclear how many hundreds of members in Seattle are already eligible to retire. but it's a fair number. It might be as high as 300 or more that are already eligible to retire today. Similarly, members who aren't eligible to retire, generally when they leave the plan, it's a savings to the plan because they can't start drawing a benefit for a period of time. However, if enough of them left to where the membership growth assumption was not being met, then that might have a impact of some of those savings, or all of those savings might be offset by the impact on the membership growth assumption. So that's the kind of moving pieces that OSA needs to analyze kind of in more detail. And we would probably give them like maybe two scenarios. What if they got 700 layoffs and it was all based on seniority? That's the way it's been discussed. And all the 700 lowest, the least senior members were laid off? Or what if they got a combination of 500 layoffs and, say, 200 retirements, or something along those lines, to give you guys a range of potential impacts to the plan? And that's separate and apart from the layoffs that we're likely to see or could see with other employers around the state. But again, that's probably not going to happen until September.
Hey, Jake, you had a comment?
Yeah, I was thinking about, I think it was the December meeting, Wolf brought up, and I keep thinking about this ever since kind of the market crash, that he was talking about, that big wheel takes a lot of turns of the small wheel to really make a difference on in the big wheel, the gears thing. And we really saw a large crash in March. We lost a lot of the stock market went down, and we've earned a lot of that back. But who knows what's going to happen over the next year? And our goal is to keep rates steady, and I think it was a good idea the plan we set up last year with adjusting the rates depending on what the funding status was. But I think with what has changed now, it's probably a good idea to just stick with what we've done in the past and go with option 2. So I would make a motion that we go with option 2.
I'll second that motion.
All right. So we have a motion to adopt option number 2, which is the 100% normal cost, which has a slight reduction. A motion's been made and seconded. So we will open up for discussion, and we'll take our time so we can make sure everybody has a chance to speak. So bear with me. Comments?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, this is Mark Johnston.
Go ahead, Mark.
I think it's for all the reasons enumerated so far, and for my history on the board, we've always been conservative and prudent in what we're doing, and I think that this reflects that historical aspect of the board's actions, and it does provide a slight reduction in rate, will help local governments that are dealing, and the state and members that are dealing with budgets impacted by the COVID-19 and the other potential losses to revenue or negative impacts on the plan. So for that reason, I'm in favor of the motion for option 2.
Other comments?
Dennis, this is Jason.
Hello, Jason. Go ahead.
Yeah, 2 things to just address Senator Holt's statement on, how everybody's perspectives look right now. I share a lot of the same perspectives, a lot of the same concerns. My biggest concern is obviously what our membership's going to look like here towards the end of the year, not only with the potential of Seattle, but agencies throughout the entire state, as far as, the force reductions happen to be either cutbacks or through social mandates. That is something that we really do have to pay attention to. And then I also agree with Mark Johnson as far as the we don't have to do anything, but there's the option to make an adjustment to lower the cost. I think is prudent. I think that's a very conservative approach, as Mark said. When it comes to rates, we're always very cautious, and justifiably so, based on the circumstances we face now. And as far as the motion goes, I also support option 2, as I think it's the most responsible approach. Even though we don't have to adopt it, it does show that we're not tone deaf to what's going on throughout the state, and it gives us an opportunity, to say we do have concerns. We have concerns about market impacts by COVID-19, social constructs that are going on in our state right now as far as defunding police organizations. But it also shows we're not tone deaf, and we are taking a responsible approach. So I do support option 2. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Jason. Other comments?
Mr. Chairman, this is Ade.
Ade, good to hear your voice. Go ahead, my friend.
Oh, thank you. I think I would support the second option also, in the sense that I think, as Jason said and the senator said, I think we've always been very conservative, and that had in the past paid off, and that is why we are one of, if not the best run retirement program in the country, but one of the best. I think by having that option 2, it puts us in the same position, but recognize that our cities, counties, and member entities will have some financial difficulties. And also, that will also send a message to the state also that we are responding to what the state may go through. Because I have the feeling by the time we're done with this COVID-19, the state also will be looking for money. And I think in the past, we've seen what they've done coming after the funds of the left plan. So having this little tweak show that responsiveness without putting the program at a major, big risk, but at least a little tweak. And I think that shows that we're responding and we're keeping in mind the difficulties of our member entities without putting the plan at a major risk. So I think a little reduction by doing that 100%, I think send messages that I think will be really appreciated by our member entities. Thank you.
Is there anybody else? Other comments? All right. Number 2, 100% no cost. Motion's made and seconded. No other debate. I'll turn over to Mr. Nelson for a roll call.
Ade?
Yes.
AJ?
Yes.
Jason?
Yes.
Tarina?
Yes.
Wolf?
Yes.
Dennis?
Yes.
Representative Bergquist?
Yes.
Senator Holy?
Yes.
Chief McElligott?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Senator Rivers?
Yes.
Mr. Chair, you have 11 ayes.
For the work on that presentation. Great. Mr. Nelson, looks like our next issue, I don't have the screen right in front of me, but I did make a note. It's the 2021-2023, I think was the operating budget. Thank you.
Yes.
I'll turn it over to you.
Yes. As you'll recall, the board last year began adopting the operating budget for the board for the biennium. Tim is here to present to you the proposed operating budget for the upcoming biennium and answer any questions that you have. And with that, I will turn it over to Tim.
Thank you, Steve. This is, for the record, Tim Valencia, Deputy Director for the Left 2 Board. This is the 21-23 operating budget presentation. So the purpose of this presentation is to seek the board's approval of the expenditure authority for the 21-23 biennium. So just in brief, that the process of having our budget or reviewing the budget and getting your authority is to ensure that you can make the expenditures necessary to meet the statutory and fiduciary responsibilities of the boards. So all the things that you would expect that fall under, such as conducting your business through board meetings and all the expenses that it takes to conduct the meetings, meeting your strategic goals for informing and educating members and stakeholders and giving them a say in the plan. So all the costs necessary to do that. Conducting professional development for trustees and staff so that you have knowledgeable staff and that you have reached all your educational goals to ensure you're meeting your fiduciary responsibility. Actually having staff, having facilities and operating a state agency for conducting all the business, and contracting for services to conduct your business as well. So those are the types of expenditures that help meet all your strategic goals and meet your statutory and fiduciary responsibilities. So the expenditures authority for state agencies is set through provided through the legislative budget process and OFM. Essentially, the expenditure authority is the amount they expect us to spend based on past history, things that are changed in appropriations, such as like the studies, their workload issues. But ultimately, they will provide a number, which is what they expect us to spend. The 21-23 expenditure authority is expected at $3,284,716. This is the amount that we're asking the board to approve for expenditure authority today. Now, Left Plan 2 is a non-appropriated agency since all the expenses are paid out of the trust fund rather than the general fund, but we are an allotted agency, which means that the expenditures are monitored through a biennial spending plan. So the allotments or the spending plan serve as the agency's best estimate of how its authorized expenditures will be spent. So this entire process is used to create transparency and a check against inappropriate use of government funds. Now, what we will do with the expenditure authority, should it be approved today, is that we will finalize a detailed budget submittal for OFM, which we have to provide to them by September 14th. This proposed budget in front of you is in line with the expenditure authority that came from the legislature and OFM, and we believe we can match that expenditure authority and meet all of your goals at the same time. Additionally, I'll comment that proportionally, this budget does match or track with our historic spending trends for the board. So in terms of the percentage that we're spending in each category is consistent with our historic spending patterns. So I'll make a few comments about some of those categories just to provide a little bit more clarity about what is included. With regards to salary and benefits, this is always the largest category. It generally falls in terms of total spending between 60 and 70% of the expenditures. There's some recognizing that the board today is going to be discussing some of the budget cost savings alternatives. That really right now we're just assuming that salaries will continue at the same level as they currently are, and not including assumptions regarding the general wage and the furloughs, knowing that that'll be discussed today. So we will make adjustments to this, to the numbers related to salary and benefits once the board has made decisions or discussed the budget reduction options. And just know that right now the salary number that's included today falls at about 64%, so right in the middle of the historic spending range. So any adjustments that we make should keep us, should allow us to stay within the expenditure authority that we're requesting. Under professional development, this category is focused on all the education and training necessary for board members and the staff. You recall that you'd recently updated your education policy, from which we expected increased travel costs and conference participation costs. That was actually addressed last year, and we went through the decision package process to increase the funds available here. So in this year's budget, or at least this level of spending, assumes 50 professional development occurrences or conferences or trainings for staff and trustees. In last year, after we made the decision package adjustment, that was actually based on 49 projected occurrences. So we are in line with the increased expectations related to the new education policy. This category also includes the costs associated with member and stakeholder outreach. So when we travel to some of the different association conferences and have our marketing table, or Steve speaks at those conferences or attends some of the local stakeholder meetings, or likewise when Steve conducts the expectation interviews, all the costs associated with traveling to those events is included in this category. And then also the travel that's associated with board meetings, at least in-person board meetings, we have assumptions built in to this category as well. Under contract, we have occasion where we need to go to outside sources for contracts. We do have some allotments in there for potential need. The areas where we may need services involve first actuarial audit services. Specifically, we set aside money if a fiscal note needs to be audited. It is the board's practice that if they have legislation that is passed which affects the contribution rates, we always have the fiscal note audited by an outside actuary. So we do set money aside for that. We may or may not use that in a given year. And also just other outside actuarial projects, such as Milliman is currently consulting on or auditing the valuation, and they just did the demographic experience study. So in this case, this budget does include an allocation for outside actuarial audit work regarding the valuation. The other place that we've set aside some money is for the potential need for legal services. In particular, in the past, we've used outside tax counsel, notably Ice Miller, who is under contract for such services. So should there be legislation that has certain legal questions, we'll utilize that outside tax counsel for review. It also gives us some ability to help address if there are, say, special projects or needs on topics that may come up during legislative session. The last item under contracts is that we are planning to engage a professional media firm to help us with communications, specifically the production of the dual response newsletter, also with social media content for communicating with members, the video production for educational videos, and then the website content. So that now, particularly in light of the pandemic, has some importance because there's a lot of new questions and information that we're going to need to have communicated. So we're going to have increased activities in this area, but also contracting out with a professional firm allows us to free up Tammy Sadler's capability to address a growing ombudsman workload. And then the other operating expense category, this is somewhat of the catch-all. This is where all the goods and services lie. So all the, just supplies we need for the office. This will include things like the outside meeting space, our equipment, our software, office supplies, everything we need to operate the agency. Part of this category also includes what we call other contractual services. This is a little bit different than the contracts category. This is where we our strategy has been to leverage services available through other state agencies, and by doing so, we're able to reduce our total staffing needs by using outside professionals, which also helps keep our total expenses down because we have a smaller footprint and we're not having just to manage additional staff. So examples of the other contractual services that we've been utilizing include the state actuary's office, the attorney general, and Office of Financial Management and Department of Enterprise Services. Specifically, they provide our financial services, so much of our back office, including accounting support, budget support, human resources support, contract support. So we don't have to have professionals on staff through those areas. The Washington Technology Services, or WATEC, formerly the Consolidated Technology, or CTS, we will be joining this year a new technology allocation pool designed for small agencies. They essentially are going to become our help desk, or our IT department. This will be important when we relocate to the new location, because we'll be losing the services that we've previously gotten from state investment boards. So this is how we will replace the services that we'll lose from their technology services. Again, this will also help free up Tammy's time to focus on the ombudsman services. The last item is, of course, the state auditor. We've been utilizing them for conducting the financial expenditure audit, which is required in statute. You'll note that there's 3 of those items: the state actuary, the DES, and the WATEC technology services. I have little stars on those. Those all appear in separate line items in the proposed spending that you saw. I just wanted to isolate that those don't actually fall under that operating expenses category themselves, because they've been broken out just to highlight that those are fairly sizable, larger spend items. So the last thing that I want to note has to do with clarifying in terms of how does the agency relocation fit into the numbers that are being proposed. And within the proposed expenditure authority that we're asking for, it does already include the increases for what we expect to be the new rent and the new utilities expense, which are higher than our current expenses. It does include the projections for increased costs for having outside board meeting space rather than having the state investment space, which we don't pay for. As I already mentioned, it does include money for the small agency technology allocation pool. And the final note is that this is an area where the spending, until we actually move and are actually in our operating space, some of these costs are going to be unknown. These are our best estimates right now in terms of these costs, but in particular, things related to the agency relocation are going to be a little bit unknown until we actually start operating in that space. But these are our best estimate at this point, but just recognize the specific spending details may change, but we do believe we can accommodate all of the needs within the expenditure authority that we're asking for today. So that is the end of my prepared remarks. I'll be happy to address any questions.
Mr. Nelson, you need to adopt this. Entertain a motion to adopt it, Steve.
That's correct.
Oh, this is Wolf. I'll move adoption.
Okay. I would entertain a motion.
Second.
Thank you, Wolf. We got a motion. All right, gotcha. Motion's been made and seconded to adopt the 2021-2023 proposed budget as presented by Tim.
Dennis?
Discussion?
There we go.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir, Steve.
Nope, I was just seeing if there was any discussion.
Not seeing any discussion or hearing. Looking for it.
Yeah. All right. Are you ready for
All right,
roll
Steve.
call?
Yep. Yes, please.
Ade?
Yes.
AJ?
What'd you say?
AJ? Jason?
Yes.
Tarina?
Yes.
Wolf?
Yes.
Dennis?
Yes.
Mr. Chair? Representative Berquist? Senator Holy?
Yes.
Chief McElligott?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Senator Rivers?
Yes.
Mr. Chair, you have 11 ayes and no nays.
Copy. You got 11-0. Thank you very much. All right. Steve, looking at our next one, looks like we have my note is I think I put budget reduction? Options. There we go.
Yes.
Number 4.
So let me pull up that presentation.
No.
Let's see, I'm not seeing how to share that. I apologize. Tammy, can you help me with the option to share the presentation?
I just passed that to you.
Can you all see that?
I'm not seeing your presentation yet, Steve.
Yeah, Tammy, can you help me out here? Just share my screen. I've got it up there. Okay. How are we doing now? Is the presentation available now? All right.
Yeah, I'm looking at the background slides, Steve.
Okay. So earlier this interim, Governor Inslee announced some budget reductions for specified agencies, and then at the same time urged separately elected officials, the legislature, courts, and independent boards and commissions such as the Left 2 Board to adopt similar measures. Specifically, the 2 items that were suggested were not implementing the scheduled 3% general wage increase, and then implementing a system of furloughs. With respect to furloughs, the agencies that were mandated, they had 8 days of furloughs between now and the end of the year. There were 4 days scheduled early on to take advantage of some federal unemployment benefits that might be available. And then 4 days later in the year. With respect to other independent boards and commissions, what we understand is that a number of the smaller boards and commissions have not adopted furloughs and then have offered up to make other cuts to the board, to their budgets in lieu of furloughs. Again, by way of background, the Left 2 board is in a non-appropriated account. It's not a general fund. There are no general fund appropriations. All of the money is in the Left Plan 2 trust fund, the same account that all the retiree benefits are paid from. So the reduction in the agency budget will help out the Left 2 retirement fund, but it won't help out the state general fund. There was a question also last month about implementing furloughs to the extent then that members become qualified for unemployment benefits. That might actually have some cost either to the state or to the pool, the risk pool for agency unemployment benefits. So the options before the board with respect to this would be either to implement the furloughs, in which case we would do 8 days between now and the end of the year, schedule those. That would represent a savings of about $25,000. So the other option would be to find $25,000 in cuts elsewhere in the budget in lieu of furloughs. And we expect, as we already discussed, the impact of COVID-19 on some of the training opportunities and the ability to travel to any kind of training. That is where we would likely end up making cuts in lieu of furloughs. With that, with respect to this option, then that's all my prepared remarks, but I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions for Steve?
Steve, this is Senator Rivers. I have a question for you. As you look at moving forward from a leadership point of view, what do you think the soundest approach is?
For me, I would prefer not to do furloughs. We can find cuts elsewhere in the budget that will allow us to better serve you guys without the potential for disruptions in service. So my preference would be no furloughs and find the cuts elsewhere.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions for Steve? Go ahead.
Mr. Chair, Jeff Holy. Steve, I know I'm on the Gambling Commission too, and we're also a standalone agency that self-funds through alternative revenue sources that are not general fund driven, demanding. Two things. I thought too much free time is a bad thing. I think about things. Two things come to mind here. One of them is that the people, and you're well aware of this, in your profession with your skill sets and the staff are unique and they're in great demand, especially when you're a top 3 best funded state retirement system in the country. And replacing people, if we went on furlough, they had to go someplace else, or creating the potential for that problem. That would be a long-term cost to the board that sometimes could be greater than the short-term savings. And if anybody takes into consideration that there will be a direct impact to the state fund, or at least the Employment Security Division, because you start laying people off here, and something that wouldn't be a cost by leaving them on, all of a sudden is going to be a cost because there's going to be a requirement for distribution of unemployment to pick up for that. I mean, there's all kinds of other aspects here that it seems like if you need to find about 25,000 savings, that shouldn't be a problem without actually putting the fund and the staffing and the model we have at risk. Your thoughts?
I agree with both your comments, Senator.
Other comments? Questions? All right. Steve, what's the suggestion? I don't know if you talked to Tor. Do we motion on something like this, or it lives
would need
within your budget?
Yeah, you would need, just like you adopted our budget, you would now just make a motion that either to implement furloughs or to find cuts in the budget in lieu of furloughs. Either one of those two motions.
All right.
Mr. Chair, this is Mark Johnston.
Mark, go ahead.
So I'd like to make a motion that the board not implement furloughs for the staff and direct the staff to reduce the budget by essentially the cost of the amount of the furloughs would be.
All right.
Second.
Is there a second? All right. Have a second. Discussion on the motion.
Mr. Chair, this is Ade.
Go ahead, Ade.
Steve, I was just wondering what the impact will be on the staff training, especially during this time. I do believe the training is more critical when you're going through the kind of changes that we're going through, because your employees will have to learn a new way of doing business. A good example is what we're doing now. All of us in a hurry, we're becoming technical experts in video conferencing. So I have the feeling your employees will have to learn new things to adapt to what the future holds. So if we significantly reduce the training budget, how would that affect the ability of the staff to respond to what the future holds?
Ade, your comment is right on point. We are going through a change in the paradigm for training, and there will be an increased need for some types of training for the team. But at the same time, I think part of this paradigm shift is that the training that will become available will be more cost effective. It won't require, for instance, travel. You're seeing some shifts to online conferences, so we may be able to get the same type of educational opportunities, just getting them without having to get on an airplane. And so I'm cautiously optimistic that we will be able to satisfy all the training requirements, both for the team and for you, the trustees, as well, at a reduced cost from what we've seen historically.
Good. Thank you.
If that changes, we'll be back to let you know. At this point in time, where things are kind of headed, I think we'll be able to do that.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Chair, this is Wolf with just a quick comment picking up on what Steve and Ade just said.
Go ahead, Wolf.
I would just offer that we use the word savings in lieu of cuts in this case in particular. That we are likely accruing savings, have accrued savings already, and considering what may occur through the rest of the state fiscal year ahead of us, will continue to accrue savings in the area of education, training, and travel, but not necessarily at the expense of conducting quality education and training opportunities. So wouldn't necessarily frame this as cuts.
All right. Okay, thank you. Who else? Any other comments? All right, so we do have a motion. Motion is made and seconded. It is in order that we, as a board agency, not support the furloughs, but as Mark mentioned, we would have staff find the appropriate savings equivalent to what the furloughs would equate to. So, no other discussion. I'll turn it over to Steve for a roll call.
Audit?
Yes.
AJ?
Yes.
Jason?
Yes.
Tarina?
Yes.
Wolf?
Yes.
Dennis?
Yes.
Representative Berquist?
Yes.
Senator Holy?
Yes.
Chief McElligott?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Senator Rivers? Senator Rivers?
Senator Rivers has dropped the call.
Mr. Chair, you have 10 ayes and no nays.
All right, thank you very much. That motion passes. Steve, you're going to continue on with your presentation?
Yeah. So
okay.
The second piece of the governor's directive had to do with a scheduled 3% general wage increase that was to go in place on July 1st. We're past July 1st, but just to let you know, though, that wage increase was not implemented for the Left 2 board. All separately, the independent agencies and commissions were not, the wage increase was not implemented, giving pending action by those or notice to OFM from those independent agencies about their intent. So for you today, the choice would be to either not implement the general wage increase or to go ahead and implement it anyway. And the governor, again, requested that all independent agencies and other separately elected officials in the legislature and other bodies of government not implement the scheduled wage increase. What we understand is that the legislative agencies and the legislature have not implemented it. All of the separately elected officials have not implemented it. Most of the judicial branch, with the possible exception of one small judicial agency, have not implemented it. At this point in time, we don't know what the status is of some of the other independent boards and commissions. We were told that OFM would do a survey during July of who chose to implement it, who chose not to implement it, and then they would share the results of that survey with the legislature in the near future. So depending on the board's action today, we would let OFM know, and then the results would be included in that survey. That gets to the point about, especially given the broad response from other agencies and other branches of government to the governor's request, there is a reputational risk component to this decision. Again, this is about a $25,000 item. So if you chose to implement the general wage increase, the effect on the budget would not be too significant, but the effect on the reputation of the agency could be. The governor is currently negotiating with some of the unions for other agencies, and part of the discussion has to do with foregoing the wage increase as a more humane, for lack of a better word, way of reducing salaries than potentially something like layoffs would be. And so that's also a concern for me, that if the wage increase was implemented for the agency, then there could be unintended consequences down the road, which would be worse for the team than foregoing the wage increase. But with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Question for Steve. Not hearing any questions. We would need to take action as a board.
Yes.
I would entertain a motion. I think Steve does a pretty good job of laying out the facts and putting an emphasis on where he thinks is probably best for the organization. So I think you've probably all heard that. I would entertain a motion.
So this Wolf, if I may move that the board forego the 3% general wage increase scheduled for implementation 7/1/2020.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Thank you. Discussion on this. We're under discussion.
Yep. Mr. Chair, this is Mark Johnston.
I was waiting for you, Mark. Thank you.
This is probably the most painful vote I've ever had to weigh in on as a board member, and I've been a board member since the very beginning. And I'm going to very, very, very reluctantly speak in favor of this motion. It sticks in my craw that there's absolutely no financial negative result of this, the state budget, since we're not supported by the state budget. And I want to, in particular, speak to the competence and the responsiveness of the staff. And it sticks in my craw that this non-implementation of the 3% general wage increase applies to them when it has no impact on the state budget. However, understanding there are some political ramifications potentially to this, I will support the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Appreciate that.
Mr. Chair, may I ask a point of clarification? This is Tor.
Hello, Tor.
Hey. So my question is, the motion didn't quite mirror the slide. I just wanted to ask whether or not the motion that was made also did not apply to any employees that did not make $53,000 a year. I just wanted to ask whether or not it was intended that the intention was to mirror the state's action. That's all. Thank you.
Yeah, Tor, we don't have any members that fall, or any employees that fall into that category.
Thank you.
Correct. Any other comments?
Mr. Chair, this is Ade.
Hi, Ade.
Steve, I think we discussed our ability to recruit and retain in the past. If we were to go this route, what impact would that have in retaining and recruiting good employees?
Ade, I'll be honest with you. I think it will have. It won't help. I've got I've got some extraordinarily capable people on this team. I've got some people that actually took a pay cut to join the team, and part of that was with the idea that come July, there would at least get a little bit of makeup on that, and that's not going to happen now. Since everybody is doing it, it probably doesn't affect our recruiting and retention relative to other state agencies here in Washington, unless they're able to promote. But it is a concern. My hope is that the legislature talks about this issue during the upcoming session, and we get some clarification about how long, is this salary freeze going to last for? Is there going to be some kind of associated hiring freeze? Are there any exceptions to that? And then that perhaps following this upcoming session, there might be some options to discuss with the board.
Yeah, I think for me, part of, I thought maybe because of this recession, people will stay put. I think, but unfortunately, based on my own experience in my office, people are moving to other agencies, not necessarily city, where they have been offered more money. My next question then is, some of the employees that we've lost in the past, did we lose them to other state agencies, or did we lose them to non-state agency or non-governmental agencies?
We lost, recently the board has been very fortunate to have modest turnover. Paul Neal, one of the research analysts, went to work for the legislature. Ryan went to work for a think tank, and he got a big promotion and a big raise when he did that. Those are the two most recent. Up until Ryan left for the Reason Foundation, every employee that we had, with one exception, who she left for medical reasons, all of them promoted to other state agencies.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Or, I'm sorry, any more discussion on the motion?
So this is Wolf. Just a quick comment again, kind of underscoring what Steve had said in his last bullet concerning reputation risk, especially in view of so many and almost all others across state government foregoing the wage increase. Just putting on my old OFM hat, you want to have vertical stripes in the middle of the herd, a brown zebra on the edge of the herd's food. If you don't do this, as painful as it is, and I completely agree with Mr. Johnston's observations, I find it unsettling and painful to do as well. But if you don't do this as an organization, and you're one among few who's standing out there by ourselves, having implemented this increase, it's going to attract a whole lot of attention, an enormous amount of attention. And then once the attention is cast, it will bring attention to everything and all kinds of things. So I think it's just a very prudent, thoughtful step in light of all the context to, yes, take the painful action to forego the wage increase at this time.
Thank you, Wolf.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, sir.
I was reminded that we actually do have an intern currently working who does fall in the category here. So Tor's suggestion to clarify the motion that it applies to all agency employees is in order.
All right, I'll defer back to Wolf. Wolf, will you consider that a friendly amendment?
Well, of course.
Gotcha. All right. So the motion is pretty much as we read on that first bullet point. Does that work, Tor?
I just wanted to make sure that that's fine, because it's written just so that we all know what it is. That was the main issue that I had. So thank you.
Okay. All righty. Any other discussion?
Mr. Chair, Jeff Foley.
Jeff, go ahead, sir.
Just as kind of a sidebar here, Steve, just because we're doing this now does not mean that we can't adjust later when this problem is passed, and attempt to bring everybody up to where they should have been without this problem existing. So we are not restraining ourselves from acting in the future to compensate people for what they would have received otherwise. Is that correct?
There may be options in the future. That's part of what I was talking about. Maybe we'll know more during session in terms of how long the freeze will be in place for, or whether, for instance, maybe a general wage increase will be a part of the next operating budget. I don't know. I don't want to guess, but regardless, one way or another, after session, we'll have a clearer idea of what the state's plan is for the next 2 years and what ability the board has to operate within that plan, what flexibility you have.
Understood. Thank you.
Other questions, comments before we vote? Not seeing or hearing anything. Mr. Nelson, roll call.
Ade?
Aye.
AJ?
Yes.
Jason?
Yes.
Karina?
Yes.
Wolf?
Yes.
Dennis? Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Representative Berquist?
Yes.
Yes. Senator Holy?
Yes.
Chief McElligott?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Senator Rivers?
She did not answer the call.
Okay. Mr. Chair, you have 10 ayes and no nays.
All right. Thank you. Motion passes. Any others, Steve, on the budget reduction topic?
Well, one follow-up. Last month, I mentioned the possibility of a supplemental rate increase, that we would look into that idea of, for instance, none of the board's actions today really affect the general fund at all. One way, with respect to the operating budget cuts, your adoption of the contribution rates will have a small positive effect on the state budget. However, the idea was raised about possibly doing a 1 basis point reduction for the state, for instance. Unfortunately, my understanding is that option would violate statutory rate setting authority of the board. So that I'm not bringing that option before you today, but I'd be happy to answer any questions. And we've got Tor here and also Mike White from the Attorney General's office to answer any questions or speak to this issue.
Any questions for Steve?
Steve, did you say Mike White from the Attorney General's office?
Yes. Many of you remember Mike from his days as actually a trustee on the board. And then He's currently at the University of Washington Law School and clerking this summer for the Attorney General.
And I'm gonna jump in here, and this is Tor, and just and yes, echo Steve's comments, and just say that Michael White has, several years ago when he was still on the board, he actually asked me about law, the law as a career field, and whether or not he should go to law school, and I attempted to dissuade him, but once he had made that decision. I'm very pleased to see that he has done well at UW and actually has aspired, I guess, to continue public service, and to that on that path he joined us as a Rule 9 intern in my division, the Revenue and Finance Division of the AG's office, where he's been with us since early June and has worked on a number of projects. And most recently, I asked him to assist me doing some research in making sure that I was able to answer these two questions, basically, that Steve has up on this screen adequately, and has been working on a memo which is, while not yet complete, hopefully will be in a position to present that to the board before the next meeting. And but he's done some great work, and I'm sure he has a very different perspective now than he did, or actually he's indicated to me already that he has a very different perspective now than he did when he was on the board, and hence is in an excellent position to assist on this and other questions. And with that, I guess I'd just like to say that if you have time, I'd love for Michael just to say hi. So.
I'd like to see that. We're pretty proud of Mike, and actually, for you taking that on, Tor, I'm hoping you get paid a little hazard pay. I just know goes along with that guy, so just take care of yourself. All right, Mike, you got a few words for us?
Tor speaks too kindly of me. Dennis, you're probably more spot on there. So, other than that, no. I've been having fun with this project though, so it's been enlightening and enjoyable to get back to work on pension stuff.
It's good to see you out there, Mike. I'm very proud of you. You're a good fellow, and you're going to do good things for us. So thanks. All right. So if are there questions that are related to this issue towards Mike or Tor?
Dennis is McElligott.
It's not lunchtime, Pat. It's okay.
I know, I understand that, but just to make sure everybody understands. So that's your opening statement, Mike, and you think you're an attorney? Hey, kind of brush up on a little bit of that crap, all right? I'm ready now.
Hey, thanks, Commissioner Chief.
Yeah, Mr. Chief, yeah. All right.
Congratulations, Mike.
Yeah. All right. Any questions related to this topic, or moving on?
Okay.
Moving on.
That concludes the items before you as far as adjustments to the agency's operating budget. You will implement your actions and notify OFM of your directions, of your actions. And Tammy, you can go ahead and get us back on. Mr. Chair, the next item up on the agenda is a COVID-19 update. And this will be very brief. There is one new item that I did want to bring to the attention of the board. The Department of Retirement Systems recently adopted an emergency rule that any employer who was taking advantage of the federal unemployment program, one of the requirements of that program is it couldn't affect your benefits. And so they adopted an emergency rule that even if you were taking some, like furloughs, for instance, in order to qualify for that federal program, that your service credit and would not be affected for pension purposes. So that emergency rule is in place. That being said, Nobody's quite sure about the legal foundation for that rule. It's in place, but I believe the plan is to put some statute behind it to support it when the legislature is back in session. That's the only COVID-19 update item that I have, Mr. Chair. I'd be happy to answer any questions about that.
Any questions for Steve?
Okay, moving right along.
All right.
The administrative update, also one brief item. Newsletter. So we are planning on scheduled to publish a newsletter in August, and we're moving forward with that with the idea that we will give the plan members an update on the status of the plan with respect to COVID. There's been a number of questions regarding benefits. Don't know what else in terms of like the demographic uncertainty that's been talked about. Might be unable to really address that, although we've been getting a lot of questions about it. I don't know that we have enough answers to put in the newsletter, but just wanted to let you know that that is scheduled to be published here in the near future, and we'll be working with you, Mr. Chair, for instance, on articles and so forth.
Sounds good.
The last item that I wanted to bring to the board's attention, you did schedule a meeting for August in the event that you needed it, but because you were able to take care of everything today as planned, there's actually nothing that you need to do in August, and in keeping with the board's past practice, if you wanted to cancel the August meeting, then the next scheduled meeting would be September 23rd. Canceling the August meeting would require a motion.
Would entertain a motion to cancel our August 23rd, our August meeting, not the 23rd, August meeting. Is there a motion to? All right, thank you, Mark. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, we have a motion made and seconded to cancel our scheduled August meeting. Discussion. Seeing none. Steve, roll call, please.
Ade?
Yes.
AJ?
Yes.
Jason?
Yes.
Farina?
Yes.
Wolf?
Yes.
Dennis?
Yes.
Representative Berquist?
Yes.
Senator Holy?
Yes.
Chief McGilligan?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Senator Rivers? And then Representative Berquist, I wasn't sure. Did you call? All right, Mr. Chair, you have 9 ayes and no nays. Oh, 10 ayes and no nays.
Got that. Thank you very much. Anything else for your administrative update?
No.
Anybody got questions or comments for Steve or the group? Go ahead. This is Representative Berquist. Go ahead.
No, sorry.
Okay. Are there comments or questions for either Executive Director Nelson or our board?
Sorry, yes. No, sorry.
Seeing or hearing no other comments forward, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So
moved.
Motion's been made and seconded to adjourn. Not seeing any discussion. Steve, you want to do the last roll call, or do we need it for that?
I think you can do this one by acclamation.
All right.
Are we getting lunch?
You're 2 hours away from dinner, buddy. Just knock it off.
All
right.
in favor of the motion?
Aye.
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 Opposed?
Aye.
All right. We are adjourned, and we will be back in September 23rd. I'd like to thank everybody for your patience as we kind of work through these meetings and your time today, of course. It was great to have such a large group as we dealt with some pretty important items, especially moving us forward for the next couple of years. So thank you all. Enjoy your day and be safe out there.